Get ready for Producers at Home. Wait a second. That's not what this show is called. It's... Oh! Bob Boden is opening up his doors to our cameras, telling his story of running some of America's best game shows. Plus, a look at his most prized game show set pieces. And now, here's your host, and this time, the only host in our show, Adam Wurtzel.
Thank you, Richard Malmus. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Hosts at Home. I'm Adam Wurtzel. Now, you heard Richard in our intro. Today is not Hosts at Home. For the first time ever, Producers at Home. And what a producer we are with. He has done pretty much everything. Is it okay that I say that? Everything?
Almost everything.
Almost everything in this fine game show business. He is TV Bob. At least that's what his license plate says.
Yes.
His name is Bob Boden. Nice to see you, Bob.
Nice to see you, Adam.
Before we start, I cannot believe I'm holding this. Tell everybody about this microphone.
Well, that is a very iconic microphone. It was used by Gene Rayburn on the Match Game from the 70s. And there's a version of it that's been adapted for the current Match Game with Alec Baldwin, but that's the real deal.
I just can't believe I'm holding this.
Well, make sure you give it back, okay?
Yeah, I will give it back. I'm going to put it right down here. We have so many questions. I mean, this could be an 8-hour interview because I'm such a fan of the genre. It will not be, I promise you,
Okay.
Bob. First question I always ask, tell us where home is for you.
I live in the Los Angeles area.
The Los Angeles area, which they've said, if you're in the Los Angeles area and you want to be a contestant on
Yes.
insert game show
Yes.
here.
Please write the word tickets on the envelope. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I guess the first question we have to ask is, because you're from in a very similar place to where I'm from, New York.
Yes.
Big Apple. What brought you here, and what made you fall in love with this genre?
Well, it all started when I was 6 years old. I grew up in New York, and my mom took me to a taping of Password when I was 6 at the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York. I knew from getting tickets from different shows that you had to be 6 to get in. So when I was 5, I started asking my mom, when I'm 6, can I go to see Password? And we did. And that is the day the light went on for me. I, prior to that, had only seen game shows on a little black and white TV at home. And all of a sudden, I'm in the studio seeing it in full color, and it came to life. And there was this enormous screen, sort of like a Jumbotron, that was how the people in the balcony, which is where we were sitting, could see the show, because the balcony protruded over the front of the set, so you couldn't see everything on the actual set. So they had a little monitor, not a little monitor, a huge monitor, and that was the biggest TV I had ever seen. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to work in game shows.
Do you remember who the celebrities were on Password that day?
I don't. I'm going to guess Betty White because it's a safe guess.
Yes.
But I don't know.
Do you have a specific memory of Alan Ludden coming out to the audience and talking to the audience and seeing him in person for the first time?
I don't actually recall if he did that, but he was certainly very affable to the audience. I remember him talking to us, or I don't recall exactly if he took questions. I was only 6, you know. But just the whole spectacle of it has stayed with me all these many decades.
And I think that you said the word spectacle, and this room is a spectacle in such a good way to any fan of game shows. I just want to look around for a second. I mean, this for me, my favorite game show of all time is Scrabble, and these are the tiles from Scrabble, which
That's
is
right.
just incredible. See, this is what's going to happen. I have all these questions I want to ask you, and then my ADD is just going to go, cram.
Yeah.
Wait till you have kids. To tell the truth, Price is Right. Let's talk about Price is Right. You were an intern on Price is Right, correct?
I was, yes.
Talk about being in the Bob Barker studio, Studio 33, and being around this icon.
Well, I was the first intern on The Price is Right, because when I asked to be an intern, they didn't know what that was. And it started when I was a student at UCLA. I really wanted, in my last quarter at school, to work on The Price is Right as an intern and then stay there the rest of my life. And part of that worked out. I had gotten to know Roger Dobkowitz, who was one of the producers at the time. I read an article about him, made a cold call to him at Goodson Todman.
Fantastic guy, by the way.
Great guy. He answered the phone, and I said, I want to be an intern. He said, what's that? And I explained, I work for you for free. You give me college credit, and I can start my career in game shows. And he said, okay, well, it's not my call. It has to go through Frank Wayne, who was the executive producer at the time. And so he switched me over to Frank's office. I spoke to his assistant, Cheryl, and she said, well, I don't know what this is, but I'll talk to Frank about it. And I said, can I call you back and just check on this? She said, sure. So a week later, I called back, and she said, no, I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to talk to Frank, but keep checking with me. Well, she didn't know what keep checking with me would result in, but I called her every week for 6 months. And finally, right around 6 months in, I said, hey, Cheryl, it's Bob again. And she said, hold on. And she put Frank on the phone, and he said, listen, kid, I don't know who you are. I don't know what this intern thing is, but if I hire you, will you leave me alone? And I said, I absolutely will never bother you again. He said, okay, you can start next week.
But you worked in that studio multiple times. $25,000 Pyramid was one of them. How in the world, and I still don't understand this, how did so many shows tape in one room at the exact same time?
Well, it was a well-oiled machine. The crew would set up The Price is Right typically on a Sunday night, and Monday morning they would tape, Tuesday they would tape, Wednesday they would tape, then they would strike the set and put up another show on Thursday and Friday. In the old days it was the Carol Burnett show. Today it's Bill Maher's talk show. And then they would strike that show on Friday night and put up another show for the weekend, typically another game show in the era where there were 3 or 4 game shows taping at the same location. So there were generally 3 different productions taping in that same studio in the course of a week. And when Price is Right had a week down, they would set up another show during the days that it normally shot. So that studio was constantly in use and is to this day.
I want you to talk about, because we did just mention Pyramid, and we're about to show something extremely cool, but talk about how you met Dick Clark for the first time and got to work with him.
Well, I met Dick Clark when I was in high school, but he doesn't remember this or wouldn't have acknowledged it. When I would go to see tapings of Pyramid when I was in high school in New York, my friends and I would wait outside the stage door after the show to get his autograph. And I got so many Dick Clark autographs because I kept going back to that show. And but I didn't really meet him. He didn't know who I was and probably wouldn't have cared. But many, many years later, I wound up as an executive at CBS. And I was assigned to, the first show I was assigned to was Press Your Luck. And then the next show I was assigned to was Pyramid. And that's an original whammy from Press Your Luck from the 80s from CBS.
So far, this interview does not get a whammy, though.
No
correct?
whammies.
Okay,
No,
good.
just big bucks.
Good.
Huge,
Good.
huge bucks.
$5,000 and a spin.
And a spin. So I was working at CBS. They said, you're going to be the point person on Pyramid. I'm like, really? Really? Pinch me. And so now I'm representing the network for the creative elements of Pyramid, working with Bob Stewart, the great Bob Stewart, who had created the show and produced it. And I got to know Dick Clark through that. And we formed a bond, and he knew that I was very serious about loving game shows and wanting to be a part of that world. And so many years later, after Pyramid had gone away, I was at ABC, also working in daytime development, and I developed some shows with Dick's company. And then 1999, just after Who Wants to Be a Millionaire comes on ABC, Dick Clark, the brilliant entrepreneur that he had become, he decided he wanted to come up with a game show idea that could be sold to compete with what was about to become a mega hit, which was Millionaire. So his son, Rack, called me on the third day that Millionaire had aired. It was a Wednesday, because the ratings had already started to climb up, and Dick was smart enough to know this is not going to reverse itself. It's going to be a monster. So Rack called me and said, Dad wants you to come in and create a game show with us that we can go out and sell to be a competitor of Millionaire. And I said, let me think about that, yes. Not much hesitation there. I brought it into Dick and his team on Friday, 2 days later. They all liked it. They wanted to tweak it a little bit, change some elements. So I retooled it over the weekend, came back Monday morning. They said, this is great. We're going to go pitch this. We pitched it on Tuesday, the next day, to the late Rick Ludwin at NBC, wonderful man. And he was now in charge of what was becoming alternative programming. Reality was not really even a term yet, but he was in charge of specials and late night, and so they gave him all this other stuff. And he said, this is a great idea, but we own the format for 21. So if we go into that space, we're going to go with something we own.
Which they did.
Which they did. And then the next day, Wednesday, we pitched it to Mike Darnell, who was in charge of alternative programming at Fox. They already had that division because they were doing all of these When Animals Attack and clip shows and so forth. So Mike had already built a kingdom there of alternative programming, which morphed into reality programming. And he was ravenous for a game show that could compete with Millionaire, because he was still is, a very competitive individual. And so he was looking for something like this. And in walks Dick Clark with me, tagging along. And he loved the idea, bought it very soon after that meeting. That's the show that became Greed.
Welcome to Greed.
And Greed was rushed to air. From the day we pitched it to the day it went on the air was about 10 weeks.
Wow. That never happens.
It never happens. We had to test the format. We had to find a host. We had to build the set. We had to cast the show.
No time for a pilot.
No pilot. No pilot. Our first show was the pilot. And we shot 6 half hours because Millionaire had started off as a half hour. And so the design was to have half-hour episodes that could be dropped into the schedule. And then we found out that Millionaire was coming back on the air in early November, and Mike, being the competitive guy he was, he wanted to beat them to air. So he told us they're coming back, I think it was November 6th. He said, I want you to come back on November 4th, and we're going to start with a 2-hour special. We said, okay, well, we only have 6 half hours. There's only 3 hours in the can. That's going to deplete most of our inventory to do a 2-hour special. He said, we're going to do a 2-hour special. I'll get you more episodes. Don't worry about it. So we premiered with a 2-hour special. We did pretty well, not Millionaire numbers. We never achieved that. But we were competitive. We were in the race, got a lot of attention. Because Mike was very competitive, he wanted to have a show that offered $2 million, since Millionaire only had $1 million.
And then it offered $4 million at one point.
We did Super Greed towards the end of our run, where we doubled it to $4 million. That turned out to be a mistake because we gave away too much money, and then we were canceled. So, but for that rush of momentum and excitement, it was an amazing fairy tale story for me, because that was my first executive producer credit, which I got on the heels of Dick Clark saying Bob's going to be the executive producer, and the network wasn't going to say no to him. And Dick knew that I could run the show, but that was the first time, I'm told, I believe this is true, the first time Dick ever shared an end credit on the show with anybody.
I want to talk about what I like to consider, what I call the golden years of Game Show Network, where you were kind of running that ship. You were the captain. Talk about your time at Game Show Network and from your start up until Russian Roulette and Cram and all of these incredible shows that you were behind.
Well, I actually was at Game Show Network when it first launched in '94. I left after a year, and then I was invited to come back in 2001. And they basically said, we want to upgrade our original programming. They knew that I had a passion for that, and I was connected in the production community. So they basically said, you decide what you want to come on. Here's a budget. We'll work with you to create a slate. Because they didn't want just one show here and one show there. They wanted primetime to be mostly, if not completely, original programming. So the first project that I lobbied for was Whammy, which was a remake of Press Your Luck. I was hoping we could put Whammy on, that it would gain some traction for a new generation of viewers who had seen either the original show on CBS or the many, many years of reruns that were running on USA Network. So Press Your Luck was still kind of in the zeitgeist. So when we brought it back in a new form with a new host, I thought it would catch on, and it did. It did quite well for us. And from there, we went to a series of really clever original shows. Russian Roulette was a wonderful show, which the penalty for getting a wrong answer on that show was that you would fall through the floor.
I love that show.
Many shows.
Look at this. Hold on a second.
Oh, yes.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Look what we have there.
That's me falling through the floor on Russian
It
Roulette.
didn't hurt, did it?
It didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. It was all very well padded.
You look like you're having a good time.
It was great. It was an amazing rush of adrenaline to fall through that hole, let me tell you. So we did Russian Roulette. That was a really fun show. Mark L. Wahlberg hosted that. And then we did Friend or Foe, which was another great show. Kennedy hosted that for us. One show I'm really proud of is Lingo, because Lingo I had remembered from when it was on in syndication in the 80s. It's a very simple, fun, play-along game. You don't have to be a genius to play it. And it was a perfect vehicle for Chuck Woolery. And the show went on, I think it did 7 seasons.
Wow.
Chuck Woolery hosted the whole way. Then they did a new version for 1 season with Bill Engvall well after I left. But simple, clean, fun, easy to play. And then we did another show that I thought was really, really clever called Cram. Cram was a show where we would have contestants stay up all night without any sleep to study material. Then we would bring them into the studio the next day, sleep deprived, and put them through a variety of physical challenges to see who could remember most of the material that they had studied.
I just want to stop you for a second because if you watch, there's a show on Netflix called Awake that claims to have this really original idea of keeping people up all night. Bob Boden did it first.
Well, yes.
He deprived people of sleep.
I will hold that moniker of sleep deprivation on a game show. But it was a really clever show. We had Graham Elwood was the host. He was a really cool young guy who appealed to a younger audience. We put it on 11 o'clock at night. That did very well for us. And then we tried a couple other original shows. We had a show called Wintuition. We had a show called Funny Money. Everything did fairly well in the midst of reruns of Regis's Millionaire, which started off the night. We had the old Match Games with Gene Rayburn right in the middle of the schedule because it always did well and was a great classic game. So we actually did have a full slate of original programming in prime time 5 nights a week on GSN when I was there.
We can talk to you for hours and hours, Bob, but unfortunately we're running a little bit short of time. I want to kind of just look around before we go. Talk about some of your most prized possessions.
Well, I've been collecting for several years. The first piece that I got was the original Any Number board from The Price is Right, which was the very first game ever played on the current version. It goes back 50 years now with Bob Barker. And I was working at CBS at the time in daytime, and they were retiring that set piece to replace it with something more contemporary looking. And they were going to take it to the trash. And as a game show lover and enthusiast and I guess now archivist and historian, I couldn't let that happen. And I had an office in the same building, and I said, instead of throwing it out, could you just bring it up to my office? And they said, well, sure, we don't want it. So they wheeled it up to my office, and it stayed there as long as I stayed there, which was another couple of years. And then when I left CBS, I figured, well, I don't want to leave this here. I want to take it with me. That piece has stayed with me for almost 40 years now. And then I would just find other things that were heading toward the trash, a lot of little props, especially from the shows I worked on, that, when they were wrapping a show, everything would just go in the dumpster. And I'm like, well, I'll take that, I'll take that, I'll take that. You get a prop, you get a prop, you get a prop.
All of this, this is a museum. This is your own museum. Strong Museum of Play, Rochester, New York, Bob Boden, Howard Blumenthal. Talk about what's going on and how all this came about.
Well, it all started with Howard Blumenthal, my partner. He has a lot of this stuff. He didn't know what to do with it. His wife was saying, get this stuff out of the house, which is a familiar tune to me. And
how long have you been married?
22 years.
22 years?
Yes. But this stuff doesn't make my wife as happy as it makes me. So I got a call from Howard, and he says, hey, I've been in touch with this museum in Rochester, the Strong Museum of Play. And I approached them and I said, what about game shows? You do the National Toy Hall of Fame, the Video Game Hall of Fame, dolls and pinball machines, everything, parlor games and everything you can imagine. What about game shows? And they said, well, we'd love to be involved with game shows. We just don't know anyone in that community. So Howard said, I got a guy. And he set them up with me, and the two of us worked very closely with the folks at the Strong Museum, a guy named Chris Bench, who is a terrific guy, and he got it right away. I mean, he saw this room on Zoom, and he realized this is the foundation piece for what will become the exhibit at what is now known as the National Archives of Game Show History. And Howard and I are the co-founders. We are providing them with a lot of research materials, scripts and notes and rundowns and set designs and all kinds of stuff that researchers will be able to access online. And ultimately, they will be building an exhibit space where a lot of this stuff and a lot of the stuff that other people have collected will live for eternity and let people enjoy it.
Thank you as a genuine fan and somebody that happens to be able to be blessed to work in this business. Thank you for that.
I'm very proud of it, and you're very welcome.
Before we go, I mentioned this earlier. We have to talk about this incredible jacket because this belonged
to Dick Clark.
When
Dick passed away several years ago, I attended his memorial service, and Cindy, his daughter, who's a dear friend of mine, came up to me and she said, Dad put aside a few things for you. I'm like, what? This man who had given me numerous things over the years actually told him, I want you to give this to Bob after I'm gone. And it was his satin jacket from the $25,000 Pyramid, and it says Dick on the front. It was embroidered with his name. It was a crew gift, which is standard for a lot of shows of that era, the 70s and 80s. Any show that lasted any length of time, all the members of the staff and crew would get satin jackets with the logo of the show. I don't think he ever wore it, maybe a couple of times, because he wasn't a satin jacket kind of guy. But he saved it for me, because he knew it would mean a lot to me, and it is one of the most prized pieces of my collection.
Well, it means a lot to us and everybody watching today on a special Producers at Home that you are sharing all of this with us. So thank you so much for being here. And I just want to say, we don't even need to lower third him. He has lower thirded, that's not even a word, he's lower third himself on this very special Producers at Home. Bob Boden has been our guest. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to do it.
We've got a host at home next week, Richard Malmus, who's on the show.
Next time on Hosts at Home, he hosts Breakfast with the Beatles, but this time we're putting this radio guy in front of the camera. He's had the honor of interviewing 4 Beatles, and now Adam has the honor of interviewing him. It's an episode that no Beatles fan should miss, with Chris Carter joins us. Adam?
Another great show next week. We can't wait for that. If you like what you see, please do us a big favor. Hit that red subscribe button. Show us some love. Plenty more game show fun. Plenty more hosts where that came from. This has been another edition of Hosts at Home, Producers at Home, whatever you want to call it. It has been fun. My name is Adam Wurtzel. I don't close the show. This man does. Bob Boden, over to you.
Thanks for playing, everyone. Bye-bye now.